I thank the gentleman. Professor, censorship isn't just done willy-nilly. There's always a purpose, an objective, some kind of motive for why some people want other people to not be able to speak. Is that fair?
Yes, I mean, the government often says that it's neutral in targeting people, but it's still a content-based decision. And yeah.
And I would just say, it might sometimes that motive be political.
It can be, yes.
Yeah, it seems to me that's what happened. I want to go to, I mean, we saw this 10 years ago, 12 years ago when the IRS was targeting people of one political persuasion, limiting their free speech rights. I think we've seen it now with what the Twitter files have exposed. I really like the term you used in your op-ed, and I think you may have said it today or someone said it earlier when you're talking about this agency principle, this censorship by surrogate, and how dangerous that can be. And I think you said in a, maybe I got this from your op-ed earlier, but you said it's one thing if Mrs. Smith calls up Twitter and says, I don't like what Mr. Jones is saying about me or whatever. It's an entirely different matter when it's the United States government telling Twitter, we got concerns about these specific accounts, which we know is what happened, again, based on the Twitter files.
Yeah, it does irk me to see people say, well, you know, the United States government was just acting like any citizen. The United States government isn't any citizen. The FBI isn't your neighbor. The FBI has subpoena authority. They have search authority. They have weapons. They're the largest law enforcement agency in the United States. So when they perform this task, it's different. There's lots of things that are more menacing when done by the government. That's one of the reasons the court has allowed for this type of agency relationship to trigger things like the First Amendment or the Fourth Amendment. And this is not a new problem. In the Fourth Amendment area, it was an old technique for officers to get private security or to get campus police or others to conduct a search. And the court said, look, if they're doing that at your direction or your behest, those are agents as well.
Yeah, it's menacing when it's done by the government. It's even more menacing when it's done by the federal government. And that's what we have here. We have the FBI. I think Mr. Armstrong made a great point when he said, okay, if parents are doing some things wrong at the local level, then local law enforcement will handle that. It's an entirely different matter when you set up a federal apparatus where neighbors can report their neighbor or people can report someone in their community to the federal government. And we know, again, from whistleblowers, over 24 parents had an FBI agent visit them, come see them, call them on the phone, investigate them based on that process that was put in place. I want to go to the fundamental question. Why is the government, in the case of the Twitter files, why is the FBI sending a list of accounts and names to Twitter, telling Twitter, we think these accounts violate your terms of service? That's sort of the fundamental question. Why in the world are they doing that? That, to me, is, when you use the term wrong in your opening statement, you've used the term menacing a number of times in today's questioning. That, to me, is as scary as it kind of gets.
Well, it is interesting. In the Twitter files, that was the same question that a Twitter executive said. At one point, he said, what gives? I mean, basically, the FBI is telling us that our terms of service are violated by all of these people. What's their role? Essentially, what is our role? And it was an honest moment. And that same question, I think, is reflected where even Jim Baker yesterday has said, I think we might need legislation, that I think that there is a need, given what has happened, to limit the FBI and other agencies.
So whenever someone on Twitter who worked for the FBI says that, would you describe that as would you use the term targeting? Would you use the term weaponization of that process we just talked about?
Well, there's no question that they're targeting posters. They're sending the names and accounts for Twitter to take action on. And by the way, this idea that, well, Twitter could say no, that's not the standard under these tests. I gave you the 4 tests that the courts use. You can say no and still be an agent overall in that relationship.
Yeah, and as you point out in your testimony, your written testimony, this targeting is not just limited to what we've learned in the Twitter files, not just this direct attack on the First Amendment. We've seen it in different, we saw it with the dossier. We've seen it with the treatment of classified documents. You referenced that, the different standards. You referenced that in your statement. And of course, we have seen it with the school board situation.